Hello and welcome to an all new episode of Up the Coast. As always, I am your host, Tyler, and it is a Duke double Saturday here. Two segments. We're going to cover the Sweet 16 game, and then we're going to preview the Elite Eight. That'll come in the second half of this episode. Jared Kotler of the Connecticut Scoreboard podcast is going to join me for a fantastic UConn breakdown. We're going to dive into that game. But you all know him here to recap in the first segment, Brian Horace of DukeBlogger.com. Brian, thank you for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this was a really fun game just for the casual fan. I think maybe not quite as fun for a Duke fan to have to deal with the heart palpitations of that, but I mean that final 10 or so minutes is some of the best you're going to see in college basketball in a given season, but I do want to pull it back to the first half of this game,
Mm.
because I think it's really important to look at the fact that, and correct me if you felt differently, I couldn't believe Duke was down one at the half. I thought they honestly played an awful first half. Caleb Foster looked really bad to start this game. I don't understand what happened where he flipped that switch and was fantastic in the second half, but he was awful coming back from the injury in the first half. And it really felt like the Boozer twins were the only people who could actually dribble the ball on this team. St. John's pressure got to them. The Red Storm were shooting the lights out from three. And I really just, going back, still don't understand how the Blue Devils managed to hang in it early on.
Well, I think it came down to just settling in. I mean, the defensive, one thing I did not agree with was their defensive scout. I think I was tweeting about that. Like, I get St. John's is not a good three-point shooting team, but also any college player worth their salt can hit an open three if nobody's there. So I was like, and I did think the pressure got to him. I think it's hard to replicate that in practice. I mean, St. John's is a different animal. There were two teams I worried about pressure wise, and that was Houston and St. John's. And Pitino's no slouch. He knows what he's doing, especially with pressing and trapping, and that's sort of his thing. And so they definitely could have been down more, but they also could have been up more. I mean, they had a spot in that first half where they had a decent lead, and then they just sort of folded a little bit. And I think that that pressure started to get to him, but I knew that Duke's been a second half team all year, so I wasn't super worried about that.
Yeah, and Kansas kind of did the same thing in terms of just letting St. John shoot. The broadcast was all over it in that game, not so much in this one, but that one, it was Bryce Hopkins who was on fire. This time he only took two shots. He honestly should have shot the ball a lot more. It felt like he was St. John's best player in this one, but just kind of going through all of it, it was two for him, two for Ejiofor, two for Darling. The guy who really killed him was Ruben Prey, who
Yeah,
went
and
4 for 4 from deep in the game, and like was somebody that in the preview, I don't think we spent more than about 5 seconds talking about him.
yeah, I knew, like, I'd seen his stats, and I knew, like, he didn't shoot a lot of threes, but he's super accurate. And I think um, that he was with the minimum of 24 makes or 24 attempts, he's the leading three-point shooter in the country. So if you're going to leave somebody open, I don't think he's the one to do it to, because he already has the height. So if you're a guard closing on him, he's already got that on you, and he makes them. So I didn't like it, but in the end it turned out okay. But he wasn't what I expected. I did not expect that to happen. I expected Hopkins to get a lot more looks, and I think he only took seven shots in the entire game, and he's
Mm-hmm.
been their
Made
best player.
6.
So yeah, that was I don't know how he didn't get more looks, to be
I mean,
honest with you.
overall, St. John's, everyone except Sellers had a pretty solid game. There was no utterly spectacular performance. Well, Ian Jackson went 1 of 7 from three, so we can count that. Bested by the Blue Devils again for young Ian there. They got a really good edge of four game. They just didn't quite get that dominant superstar level performance that it felt like they might have needed to win this one. Mitchell and Hopkins were excellent. But on the flip side, they just didn't get that role player performance to match Isaiah Evans, going 10 of 15 from the field, 25 points. And that whole first half, as Duke is playing poorly, And honestly, I felt like the only guys holding their own in that first half were the Boozer twins and Evans. But Evans hit every single shot that he was given just an inch of space in this game, and he was the best player out there, better than Boozer, better than Ejiofor.
Yeah, I mean, I think Evans has had a chip on his shoulder ever since the Carolina loss, and I think he is a guy that knows what it feels like to lose these games. And I think he's probably the only one that really knows what it feels like to lose these games. And I think you know, I'm sure he probably doesn't feel this way, but I feel like he ends up taking a back seat to Boozer because Boozer's sort of the face of the franchise sort of thing. But I think Duke doesn't win this game. They don't stay in this game without his elite shot making. I mean, some of those shots are just like NBA scouts have to be drooling over some of those. And he's been the most consistent offensive player, in my opinion, half to half, in the tournament for Duke.
It You talk about the NBA scouts and the broadcast hit a couple of times on like the wow, such great credit to him for coming back after having an inconsistent role last year. What was he gonna do? Go transfer to a crappier program? It was to me, I
Well,
always felt like it was only a matter of whether or not he went to the NBA draft, and he followed exactly what he should have done. He was not going to be a first round pick. He would have been stuck in the G League all year. Comes back, got a hell of a lot better, and now he's someone who's probably like borderline top 20.
there's a lot of pressure being a North Carolina kid playing at a North Carolina school. And the way he was in high school, he was the guy that got 20 shots a game. And he was the guy that put up those giant numbers. Yeah, there's a lot of kids that, yeah, he needed to probably, come back and get
He
better.
needed to come back. It
But a
would
lot of kids
he
don't.
was not ready last year.
But a lot of kids don't. And a lot of kids transfer to make sure that they get the minutes that they want. And I think the credit to him goes, he stuck it out in a place where he wasn't necessarily promised those minutes. I mean, he could have gone to NC State and been their go-to guy. He could have gone to a lot of schools, gotten probably a bigger bag, and been the man at any of those schools. But what are you really learning there? I think there was a piece put out by Chris Lee where he's talking about where he's talking to Isaiah's mom and how she said to him, "You need to sit with adversity." Because the same thing happened to him in high school where he was a ninth grader. He thought he should be playing varsity, but he was playing, JV. And I think that was a good lesson for him to take to Duke. Whereas, you know, via like Cooper Flag's mom, if you're the best player in the gym, find a new gym. And he hasn't been the best player. And I think he learned that, like, okay, sitting in this adversity is going to make me ready for the NBA because the NBA, you can't run. You're in a contract, you're not going anywhere. So you either get better or you sit on the bench. And I think I think it is a credit to him that he embraced that instead of just taking the easier route, not necessarily going to the NBA, but going to another squad where he would be the A player.
So the other guy, of course, Cameron Boozer, just yet another quiet yet spectacular 22 and 10. So I feel like we probably should have just been doing this all throughout the year. We'll play a game here of what was the best thing to Cameron Boozer's game in this one because we just got to give him credit for something amidst just quiet excellence again.
Yeah, I mean, I think he had his problems, but in the end, I think just being steady, it's easy to get rattled. I mean, St. John's is a very physical team, and he did not, and as an 18-year-old kid playing against these men, he didn't let it get to him. So I think it's very easy for someone as young as him to let that pressure dictate how you play in the game. And I don't think he did that at all. I think he chose his spots. He made a few errors, three turnovers. You get that when you handle the ball as much as he does. To be able to come back in that second half, play a really strong half, and then be the aggressor. I think that from an 18-year-old freshman I think that was the best part of his game.
The one I want to toss out, and he actually led the team in turnovers in this game, so it's funny to say it. Well, him and Sark tied for it. He was the outlet against the press.
Yeah.
Where once he got the ball around half court, St. John's just couldn't take it off of him. He just kind of plunged his way through. It's like he was trying to work his way through the paint, but just the middle of the court instead. And I felt like he was the only reason they survived against that press. They were getting pummeled early on. I truly do not understand how they only had 9 turnovers. And him and Caden were the only guys who could dribble the ball early, which then also and just jump in wherever. But that also brings us to Caleb Foster in the second half and his ball handling just being crucial.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason why the turnovers looked like they were more than they were was because they came in bunches. Like it was one in a row, then another in a row, and so I think that was sort of it made it seem like they had turned the ball over 17 times. I think just the frequency in a short span of time in which they happened, and then the manner in which they happened. But luckily, I think after the 16-minute mark of the second half, they only committed one after that. So I think, they realized what was going on. They fixed the issue. But I expect it. I mean, for a team full of freshmen, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. But as you were mentioned, going into the second half, Caleb Foster, I think he found himself. I think he found, oh, this is what I've been doing all, before I got hurt. And this is, again, Shire mentioned this is his first time playing 5-on-5 basketball since the injury. So I'm not surprised there were issues, but he didn't have any turnovers, which I'm happy about. 2 assists, 0 turnovers. I'll take it with 11 points any time, especially considering the lack of playing time, since for 20 days. I'll take it every time.
So you say one in the last 16 minutes. Well, that's basically right when Foster got back in and started to play well. And
Yeah.
it's not coincidental. It was so important to this game. Just having him out there, being able to drive to the hoop. We're just seeing kind of with each game it layers on Duke's inability to get to the rim when they're incomplete. Or in the Siena game, they just couldn't do it. And then the second half against TCU, Gungba starts to find himself, and all of a sudden those entry passes to Boozer come back. And now, second half of St. John's, Foster starts to find himself, and him and Caden Boozer are able to get downhill, create a couple of layups for them, and they're not at 100%, but it does feel like the offensive engine is back to full strength. Now, the defensive engine, that may be a question in this UConn game if with both of those guys still banged up, but it feels like we're getting Duke back to normal here.
Yeah, like you say, we're not quite there yet. I would feel better if they had a week before the UConn game, because obviously, they're still trying to work Pat back. They're still trying to work Caleb back into normal, and neither of them are practicing. So there's still going to be those hiccups in the UConn game. I'm not going to be shocked if that occurs. But there is a little bit of extra oomph with those guys back. I mean, they do a lot, and I think we'll see a different version of Duke after the St. John's game because St. John's plays a completely different brand of basketball than UConn plays. So I don't think the errors that we saw against St. John's are going to be the same things we see against UConn.
Any other thoughts on this one?
On the UConn game or the St.
No,
John's?
on St. John's.
Uh, I want to rail against the narrative that was on social media that Duke is going to get pushed around by someone. I I think that people that think that haven't watched Duke play. They haven't been pushed around at all. And I think, you know, people tend to use maybe historical context and to try to place that onto a current team, and it's just not going to be a thing. And I think that's one thing that Shire has done since he's been there, especially after the debacle against Tennessee in the tournament. We're not going to be a team that gets pushed around. And I think against St. John's, a team that they were fully expected to be bullied by, they actually, and to use Patino's own words, we couldn't stop the bully drives. Love that.
Yeah, I mean, even when Duke was disrupted, it was St. John's speed on the wings that caused them problems. It was not the physicality of Ejiofor and Mitchell and company. But last thing for you,
Mhm.
we had a whole week in between Duke games. Things seem to be going, I was going to say well, but things are basically going normal in Durham at this point. Um, did you get more laughs at North Carolina or NC State's situation this week?
More laughs at UNC. I felt bad for NC State because I think everybody who watches college basketball knew exactly how this was going to turn out the minute they hired Will Wade. I mean, and I know there's a lot of upset NC State people, but I'm like, if you hire a snake, you're going to get bit. Like it's just that's just how it's going to happen, and everyone knew that. It's like you don't sell your soul and expect, the devil's not going to take his due. And it's just they had they had an opportunity to hire Ryan Odom from Virginia, and they didn't do it. Like, what are you
I
doing?
still think Ryan Odom would have taken Virginia, but yeah, I mean, regardless, he'll probably be there 20 years. So,
Exactly. And there's no way Will Wade was going to be there more than a year. There was no way.
well, I think you kind of look at, and this is a whole big conversation to have where you look at Josh Schertz at St. Louis and Ben McCollum at Iowa, and with this North Carolina opening, and could Kansas potentially open, and what might open depending on who Carolina hires. You get a really good coach, which Will Wade still is. And I think you're kind of trying to figure out the cost benefit of how much does he have to accomplish to feel like it's worth it. Whereas, like, if Ben McCollum, and we're recording this, by the time people hear this, Iowa, Illinois will probably be over. Ben McCollum might make a Final Four at Iowa and then could just get North Carolina or Kansas. And I think every Iowa fan takes the trade off of having him for 1 year to get that Final Four without question.
Oh yeah, without a
If
doubt.
if you're NC State getting losing in the first four and Darion Williams being an embarrassment this year, I think you would have just rather just hired your next coach this offseason instead.
Yeah, but now they're out, however much they paid Wade, they're, I don't want to use the word laughing stock, but everybody in college basketball is talking about how they got taken for a ride. I mean, I don't know. You have to make the right choice in these places. And in NC State, I don't even know if they ever should have let Kevin Keats go, to be honest with you, or at least kept him around for a bit because they're probably still paying him, you know. So I don't know. I feel more sad for them than I do because I know a lot of NC State fans really thought that Wade was going to be there for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and I never saw that. Like I hoped it for them because we all want the triangle basketball to be, elite level, but eh, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. I still don't think they're going to get Josh Schertz, but it's going to be interesting whether it's Gainey. There's not a ton of super logical candidates unless they're going to go try to steal like Chris Jans from Mississippi State.
I think Gainey makes
Maybe Flynn
sense.
Clayman.
I think Gainey makes sense. He's a guy
He
that you
definitely
know
makes
isn't going to
sense.
use it as a stepping stone. I think he would love to be home and he would love to stay here for many years. I think that's a guy you want. And with the way, you know, teams are hiring, like Duke got Shire, Luke Locke's at Florida State alumni. I mean, I think that's sort of the way to go because those guys want to be there. They're not just looking for the next big job. So I would love Justin, and he's a great coach, and I think he could do really good things there. And it's something you can build off. You can build with Justin Gainey.
Yeah, I would be surprised honestly at this point if he's not the answer, but this search could get interesting, especially if Tennessee wins against Michigan and then Gainey has to go play some Final Four games, so might delay NC State even further. But we weren't here to talk about that. We were here to talk about the Duke Blue Devils who continue to win. And Brian, you're going to be continuing to follow this team along the rest of this season and next season and so on and so forth. Where can all the good listeners find you?
Yeah, hit me up on at dukeblogger.com. Just wrote a nice article on Caleb Foster's Cinderella story, and on Twitter/X at dukeblogger, Blue Sky at dukeblogger.com.
All right, everyone go follow Brian, and thank you for joining me.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.